Before my mission, I went to the University of Utah for 2 years. And then I went on my mission, got back from my mission, finished the university. During the time just before I graduated, I was able to get a job with the university as a testing. I would teach a couple of classes as a student, helping out a little bit. Then in the mechanical engineering, I helped them work on some testing machines. And because of that, well, they had me test, well, there was about 4 of us that were working in that lab. And we tested fiberglass in resin. And because of that, after I graduated, I got a job with Hercules Powder Company, who were just starting up Bacchus, Utah. I got my job there, and that was during the summer before I graduated, actually. So I got to help them in testing. My career there started out after graduation, then I continued on. I had probably, well, it was in the testing department, and we had a very interesting testing group. And I had several people that worked for me after that. One of those people that I was in the bishopric in his ward, and he asked me if I'd like to have a ward party, if you will, at the Villa Theater, that he knew a girl that maybe I would like to go out with. So I went on a blind date with her. The Villa Theater showed How the West Was Won, and that was our first date. And so then I guess it was about a year I dated off and on, and then I proposed marriage. We talked about children and everything before we got married too. Her name was Donna Mae Bone. She had a fairly large family, 8 brothers and sisters. And she said, I would like to have a large family. And we talked about it, and she said, I would like 6 children. Since I came from a family of 3 children, that was quite a shock to me. And I said, okay, that sounds fine. I was working at Hercules Powder Company at the time. Just after we got married, my father decided to go into the real estate business, or he tried to, and he was not very good at it. But he did sell me a house on Mars Way in Salt Lake. We were there for probably 3 months, and Hercules called me and said, we're closing up this part of this situation here, working on the Minuteman missile here. And he says, my boss said, okay, we are going to send you to New Jersey, where they're working on the Polaris missile and some other missiles, and you'll be testing there. So I told Donna, she was working, teaching 4th grade. I said, well, you know, it could be an interesting adventure that we're going. So we got in my car, and I had a Porsche at the time. That was another thing. As soon as I started working, I decided that Porsche looked really neat, and so I bought a new Porsche. That's the only time I'm ever going to be able to afford that. The car cost $4,500, which was about the same price as a Cadillac at the time. And I was right, I could never afford it after that. But we went to Princeton, New Jersey, and we rented a house for a while, and that spring we bought a house in Belmead, I believe it was. My work was in Rocky Hill, New Jersey, and this is just a few miles north of that. It was a main train station hub for the people to go to New York. We bought a nice little house. In fact, it was built for us. We bought a lot, and the lot was about 1.25 acres lot. We had our first daughter there. Daughter was born in January, about a year and a quarter after we got married. We named her Barbara Ann. She was a cute little baby, and from that time forth, we decided that was our first child, Barbara. Our other children, we're going to name them alphabetical order. So our next child was another daughter, Karen, and at that time, they closed up the Rocky Hill plant, and they asked me if I wanted to transfer to another plant or leave. Either way, I could choose. The other plant was in Cumberland, Maryland. We had our second child there in Cumberland, and another house we bought new and had it built for us, and that was in Winslow Court, I believe. We lived in New Jersey, or in Maryland, for about 5 years. After 5 years, we lived in Maryland, 3 Winslow Court in Belmead in Maryland for 5 years. We had some more kids, I got several promotions, and we were working with new materials. Finally, we got into, we were working with Kevlar materials, and we worked finally down to graphite composite materials. It was a carbon fiber. I was an engineer with Hercules. At the time that I was in Maryland, I worked on rocket motor designs, testing, and one of the interesting things that I did was they had a program in which I built a fragmentable nozzle. Now, a fragmentable nozzle means a nozzle that acts as a nozzle during the firing, but after the firing, then it would disintegrate completely. And what they wanted this for was a sounding rocket. Shoot the rocket up, and after it burned out, then before it could come back down and hurt somebody, the nozzle would fragment completely. And I had to design a way to do that. And that was very interesting because I had to try to make things as cheap as possible. And yet one technician and myself I designed it and he manufactured it, and we tested it then. I not only had to test the nozzle, but I had to build a propellant and rocket to take it. It was on the ground. It was just a test rocket, but we had to test that. And after that, then I had to blow it up. I had to blow it up in a vacuum. So I had to design a vacuum chamber so that this thing could be blown up inside that vacuum chamber, and then gather all the pieces and make sure that they were small enough to make sure that everything was good. I also had to, at that time, build a carrier for that nozzle because the nozzle was full of explosives, and I had to make sure that nobody got hurt carrying it out to the rocket themselves. So that was one of the things that I did. They moved back to Salt Lake and asked me to come along with it, where we continued to develop this graphite fiber for all kinds of space applications. We were working on a highly classified projects that we could never talk about, never discuss with our families or with anybody, and that got to be very exciting. It was very compartmentalized. In other words, only the people that were working on that project could know anything about it. To introduce me to that program, one of the people that we worked with said, "We need you to get a plane ticket, and we will then talk to you about that." So with Hercules, I told them that I needed to go someplace. They got me a plane ticket. This fellow went to the airport with me, exchanged the plane tickets to go to another place, and I went to this other place, and he said, "You will be contacted. Go to this motel," and I did. I never knew where I was, but they took me to this place. I went inside. They told me what I had to know in order to be brought up to date on the project that I was working on. And when I got back at Hercules, I was told that I couldn't tell. My boss knew about it, but his boss didn't know about it, and all the higher-ups didn't know anything about it. And they finally told us that if anybody called in to Hercules and asked for us, the operators were told that we didn't work there. We had our own little black operations there, and that was very, very interesting. We built some very high-tech projects there. We also built the first graphite Formula One race car. That was an interesting experience. I was able to go on the Formula One races in Detroit, in Los Angeles, and in Las Vegas while they were there. The race car that we built, the first driver that took that out got into an accident going 160 miles an hour, going into the wall backwards. The engine came off, the wheels came off, and he was able to get up and walk out of that car. And that was the first time that they had ever had anything that bad happen in race cars where they didn't kill the driver. From then on, everybody started to build cars out of the graphite fiber. So we were kind of the head of the pack there. I look at each of my kids, and they were different. They were all different. Barbara, our first one, she was always obedient, and she would get mad at herself for not doing everything perfect. She had piano lessons, and as she was playing the piano, if she would hit a wrong note, she would get mad at herself and spank her hands because she wanted to be perfect. Our second one, Karen, she was an early walker and talker. She could do things that was beyond anything that I had ever seen. In fact, we talked with her. Well, she talked with us about coming down to the earth. And the veil we felt, had not been closed at the time. She still had some memories of before she was born, which was very interesting and unusual to us, but she soon lost that. But it was, for the first little bit, it was very, very interesting. She was always good at talking and telling things. Kenneth came along. He was always gregarious, had lots of friends, and he was always sports-minded. He liked to do things sporting. I was never into sports, but he was. But he was cautious too. I remember in hockey, he loved hockey, but he was also cautious enough to see if somebody was coming after him or coming toward him. He'd get out of the way and try to scoot around him. He graduated from the University of Utah and then went on to get a law degree. Went back to Pittsburgh. Our next one was Patricia, and she was obedient. She went to BYU. So did Barbara. Kenneth went to the University of Utah, and Karen went to St. George in Cedar City, the university there, and she got a nursing degree. Barbara met her husband there, and he got his physics degree. Patricia went on, got a degree at BYU. At the time, went on his mission. Donna decided that she wanted to leave the family. She said, I have given my life to my kids, which was true. She had done everything for them and loved them so much. She started to learn about teaching from the Montessori method and taught all our kids that way. But when Kenneth was on his mission, she decided to leave. I called up his mission president and told him, and he said, well, Kenneth is just fine here. He will be okay and to finish his mission. After his mission, my father and my daughter Patricia and myself went over to England, which is where he was on his mission, picked him up, and spent 2 weeks over there, a week in England and a week over in Germany. Dad showed us around where he used to live and some of his relatives that were still living there. After that, Patricia was still in school. She called me and said, Dad, I would like to go on a mission. I said, that's wonderful. So she went on a mission to Chile. And I was really happy about that. She was able to overcome her loss of her mother, so to speak, and go on a mission. She met her husband going back to school, and he was a lawyer also. And they had children, had several grandchildren. After Patricia, then we had Scott, and he was kind of our problem child. He would not like to go to school, so we sent him on to that was an alternate type of school, almost like a homeschool, but in another place. And we found that he skipped school a lot and went to the mall, but he was able to graduate. Wayne was our last baby, and he was a brilliant child. And when Donna left, he went off with his mother, as well as Scott did, and with his mother for several years. And when Scott got to be high school age, he came back to live with me, and he went to Brighton High School in Salt Lake. And after graduating from high school, he had such good grades, he went on to college with a complete scholarship. Everything was paid for, all his books, all his tuition, and he graduated in computer science and physics. He went on to go to Maryland, University of Maryland, in physics, had a full ride scholarship there, got his PhD, and he got married there. He is now working in Albuquerque at Sandia Labs, and he's still brilliant. And he essentially left with Donna, did not really come back to the church, although he did marry a girl that was in the church, and she is still very strong in the church in Albuquerque. Those are my kids. And after that, after a couple of years after Donna left, I got to know Mary. Mary Taylor is her name. She was divorced. Her husband cheated on her, married his secretary. She had helped him all through school, and he got his doctorate degree in education. She wrote most of his papers for him and stuff like that, but she never did want to get a college degree. They had 5 children. She had a back problem. They operated on her back just as they were, I guess, getting divorced. The doctor that operated on her made a mess of it, and she was paralyzed from her waist down, and she could not get up, not do anything, and her kids then had to help her do with what she could do. In the hospital, after the doctors told her that she was paralyzed and she could not move her feet or anything, after months, another doctor told her that try to move your toe, see if you can move it. So months later, she was able to move that toe. Her brain was able to reconnect in a little bit. She was never able to walk properly. She was an incomplete paraplegic. So when she walked, it isn't like when you and I walk. She would stamp her feet and she could feel the vibrations come up, and then she knew that she was able, or where she was. She had to have things organized because she would be off balance all the time. But after we got married, we had a nice life together. We built this house. I think most of her children and some of ours lived in this house at one time or another, even with the granddaughters coming here to live. And I was happy to do that for us. But as you can see, she loved nice things, and I was happy to give her the things that she had. She had a house which she sold. In fact, I guess most of the things in this house, the beautiful things, were paid for by the house that she had sold. I enjoyed watching the kids grow up and watching them accomplish the things that they would like to do. I think I treated them all as children as they were growing up. We had very interesting family home evenings where the kids would give the lesson, I would give the lesson, and we'd go around. I'd enjoy that, and the kids would enjoy that too. I think they got bored, but when Donna left, Barbara and her husband Barry, I was able to talk to them as adults. And that's the first time I've talked to my kids as adults, and it really was a blessing to be able to talk to them one-on-one and as an adult. Again, I enjoyed watching my family grow up. A lot of times I was away at work doing things. Donna held the family together, and I really, really loved her for that. I appreciated her.